But there goes the jacket, and there goes the watch.
And here come the white pieces.
And here come the white pieces indeed. So Kasparov getting ready short, certainly disappointed by the last game. The way Kasparov played was really in style. That looked like some vintage Kasparov in that game. Maybe not perfect play, but he played it with energy. He played it with confidence, sacked the pawn right out of the opening and said, let's just play. Let's just play.
Right.
That's amazing. I mean,
it was beautiful style.
This guy could still be top 10, I think, if he played regularly. If he had been playing all this time, I still think he's in the world's top 10.
He keeps himself sharp. That's what he says, and you can see it in his style. He's not afraid of taking risks. He's not afraid of playing strange moves. And speaking of strange moves, it seems like Short is coming out with a two-knight tango, I believe it's called.
Well, he did have d6 on the board, so maybe not quite, but it is an unusual setup. That knight on c6 coming out right out of the opening and trying to get Kasparov on his back foot already. Kasparov knows this is some preparation, but it can't be bad to develop your pieces. And now g6.
This looks like a funky perch, but it's weird with the knight on c6. The knight doesn't usually belong there because it's more flexible on d7, and it's a little bit easy to target on c6 with a move such as d5. Even the move d5 immediately is possible.
But opening success goes to Short already. I'm sorry. Well, you take a look at this. Already Kasparov thinking about what to do on move 5. I mean, 2 pawns up, 2 knights up, and move 5, he's thinking it's just too much to be giving a big time advantage in the opening all the time. And he's not going to get an edge here. I mean, make a couple of moves. And he's played d5, knight back to b8 quite quickly. And Kasparov's going to have to make some moves. So I guess the d5 decision was an important one he had to think about. And now they're making a couple of fast moves.
I always prefer playing d5 when I have the possibility of following it up with c4, since after all I'm gaining space on the queen side, I want to gain even more space. It feels like the time gained by Short justifies the time lost in tempi in development. So we're going to have to see this battle between the clock and the position. It feels like he should play a lot faster than he is at the moment.
All right, so we are seeing this move now. It looks like Short has castled and played bishop g4.
And bishop g4, which is a typical idea now that the dark squares are weakened. h3 played quickly, and of course the bishop has to come off the board to justify the bishop going to g4. And we have a lot of quick moves being played.
Yes, and Kasparov has played a5 as well, and a6 by Short, just dealing with that incursion or that upstart pawn on the a file going down to a5. And it looks as though we're back to this classic battle, the argument of the two knights, the two bishops versus the knights.
Right, but this one was actually a voluntary giveaway by Short based on the weakness of the dark squares that Kasparov has in his position. So he wants to play against this technically weak bishop on f3, which is unable to really participate in a lot of battles because of the pawn structure in the center.
And lots of interesting last 2 moves, bishop to e3, knight bd7, and bishop to d4. That's a fascinating concept here, answered by rook to e8, and now rook to e1 by Kasparov. What's the point of this bishop d4 maneuver?
I'm trying to figure it out. He's probably baiting some kind of c5 idea. Maybe he feels that c5 would just cripple black's pieces, but I'm not entirely sure why the bishop's on d4 at the moment.
Queen to c7 now has been played after those last couple of moves. Queen to c7, just finishing his development, and not easy for Kasparov to move the pawns forward to get a break. That makes a lot of sense. e5 is not on play right now. By trading off the light squared bishop, Kasparov no longer has the knight. He has a bishop, but his bishop can only guard light squares. So it's easy for black to guard those light squares. Right now in particular, that e5 square, it's easy for black to guard the dark squares, excuse me. That e5 square is the critical square that we're...
And it's so important for black to be able to hold down the advanced e5. If Kasparov manages to get it in for some reason, he's just going to rip apart the position. The bishops are going to become monstrous.
But look at this last move, knight to a4, and Short has whipped out the move e5 instantly in response, attacking the bishop and allowing a trade on the e6 square.
Absolutely
and Kasparov
natural.
has ignored it and played bishop to b6.
Yeah, he wants to use his space advantage. He's not going to really worry about the center as much. He just wants to focus on the queen side at the moment. He wants to prove that the weakness on b6 is quite real. However, after, for example, taking on b6, which was played, if I take with the knight and I just move the rook away, I'm going to assume to d8. I have the quick idea of knight d7, challenging the knight on b6. I don't think it's a big deal. And if you take with the pawn, it just becomes a weakness on b6. I don't think it really gives you
Taken with the
anything.
knight and rook to d8 instantly. And again, we see the value of trading off the light square bishop for a knight. And now we see the dark square bishop gone, and black is in control of the dark squares.
And a minute and a half advantage from what I can see.
Serious advantage on the clock. It looks like black is perfectly fine here. I mean,
Yeah, it comes as a really nice bounce back here for short. I still feel white's a little bit better, but it doesn't seem to be that much. I feel he can get out of trouble without that many issues.
Rook to e3 has been played. And if we take a look at the clock times, the actual clock times, we see right now they're hovering over the board intensely, and a big advantage on the clock, over 2 minutes. Well, just a little under 2 minutes on the clock, and now knight to d7, challenging the knight, but Kasparov insisting on getting a hold of that b6 square, and that's an interesting maneuver because then he might be able to put more pressure on the b7 pawn by bringing another rook to the b file. So a very creative maneuver by Kasparov, bringing his rook up.
Now I'm wondering what happens on rook, knight takes b6, rook takes b6, and if I can take on d5. I'm wondering, because I think here Kasparov has to take with the queen, and then, well, there's this idea of taking on c2, which I don't think is immediately that great.
f5, talk about blowing up a position. f5 is now on the board. That seems bananas in this position.
To play
that
f5.
just seems like a wild decision.
It seems a little crazy. I can definitely say that. He wants that central pawn mass, but can he really do anything with it? I'm actually wondering if f5 has a threat.
There is no threat. That's my problem with it. It doesn't seem to be a threat with the move f5. It just seems as though
And Kasparov voluntarily takes on d7 in order to install his rook on the b6 square.
But also opening up lines soon. This f5 move looks like it will invite white to take on f5 at some point, and he has that long diagonal with his light square bishop.
It's a little suspicious, I agree. This f5 move looks very suspicious because it doesn't have a threat. It just gives options.
And in fact, after I was about to say queen d3, and you have no way of breaking through on that side. I mean,
and there's immediately the threat of pawn takes on c6, pawn takes on c6, queen takes a6. And
win a pawn. So c5 was played to stop that, but now rook posting up on b6, a great square for the rook, and it looks as though Kasparov is in complete control. How will black get any play here?
It's a little unpleasant, I have to admit that. But after rook b8, maybe here short can try to force Kasparov to prove his advantage. Maybe I expect a further rook lift with rook a3, rook b3, because short's idea would be to play a very quick bishop f6, bishop d8 in order to cover his weaknesses on the queen side. Now the thing about space advantage is that it allows you to swing pieces on both sides of the board much easier than your opponent. So here, because white has the space advantage, he can always think about taking on f5 and swinging his rooks to the king side in case that black becomes too solid on the queen side. There are options. It's obviously much easier to play with white, but it's not going to be easier if Kasparov falls under a minute and some.
Rook to f8. That's a strange looking move. Rook to f8. I'm not sure what this does. And b4 on the board. b4 ripping open the queen side and looking to bring his rook to the b1 square. Is this sound? I mean, this looks, if it's good, black could be in a lot of trouble, but it also gives black some opportunities. Here he took on b4, now rook over to b1. Rook.
He's going to recapture with the one rook, which allows his bind to continue. Of course, black's going to be fine if he gets in bishop f6, d8. I just don't think he can do it on time. So he's still in a little bit of problems. He has to defend this pawn on b7. It's a little awkward to do so. Also, now the pawn on d6 can become a target, and there's always this ideas of c5 breaks. Despite the fact that short has the square c5, I don't really know if he can use it. He played the move rook c5.
Rook c5, excuse me, and now rook takes on b4 and rook takes on a5.
Risky.
Giving away
up
the
b7
pawn. But where is his counterplay? Is the king going to be safe on h2? Is the bishop going to land on the f4 square and cause any problems? Queen b1 stopping any possible counterplay on the back rank. But the clocks must be a huge factor now, starting to play on both players' minds. After queen back to d8, there goes the b pawn, and both sides, 154 for short, 113 for Kasparov, but the rooks have crashed through on the b file. How does black play? Black has no play. In fact, black has to defend queen f6 has been played.
He's trying to create something out of nothing. He hopes f takes e4 is at some point a threat. There's the real idea of simply doubling up on the 7th file with rook a7, rook b7.
But Kasparov is under a minute now. Kasparov at 57 seconds, having to think about the possibilities here. And as you mentioned, maybe rook aside, but he's decided to guard the f2 square.
The idea is simple. If takes, I can take with the bishop.
And 139 for black. Black with very little options here to what move to do. He doesn't have any real active play, and he's looking around for a move. He needs to waste a move. Rook a3, that's a good waste move. Also, eyeballing the bishop, actually.
He wants to sacrifice something. He knows that he's in tempo pressure. He needs to do something now before the rooks actually coordinate.
And that's an annoying piece, putting the rook on that square. The potential of the sack. Suddenly black gets counterplay, or at least pretend counterplay, with queen g5 check, and it looks as though he's getting some play. And Kasparov now down to 32 seconds. And he's played c5. What is that about? Breaking through with this move. But doesn't that allow the sacrifice to happen on f3? I mean, c5 is...
Well, I'm trying to figure out what the point is if I just take the pawn. And that's
and
exactly
it
what
has been
Nigel
captured with 32
asking.
seconds left for Kasparov. What is the main point? His d-pawn doesn't seem to be going anywhere immediately. And can he play rook to b6?
He can play rook b6, but the problem would be queen g5 gains a tempo on the bishop on f3.
Absolutely. And also 16 seconds left on the clock. I'm not sure.
Can somebody tell Kasparov to move?
Kasparov's got to move. I mean, he's got to move. 10 seconds, counting down, only 8 seconds left, and he's finally played rook a2, getting 3 seconds back.
But he has 9 seconds?
He has 9 seconds total, 9 seconds. He'll get 3 seconds every time he moves, but he's shaking his head now. The counterplay by Short, bringing him back in the game, and he has taken on a2, and now moved this king off the line to h8. Only 7 seconds left for Kasparov. His time ticking down. He's got to make a move. Come on, 2 seconds, 1 second. And he has run out of time. He is flagged. Kasparov has run out of time, completely distracted.
Wow.
Amazing. Kasparov not being aware of the clock.
I did not see that coming.
That's insane.
He just was completely unaware. He was so focused on the position, and this is the kind of things that happen when you're rusty.
Exactly, exactly. The clock starts to play a factor. It doesn't matter how good your moves are, the clock becomes a real issue, and he was literally just unaware.
He was just unaware.
He had no idea how bad his time situation was, that he had to be blitzing out moves.
Exactly. At least when Robson gets into these situations, he knows he has 1 second. He's got it under control. I think Kasparov just had no idea he was under 10 seconds.
No, he did not look like a man who plays a lot of blitz or played enough blitz to know that there's pressure on. And Nigel just kept his chances alive and bounced back to even the score. A very important victory for him, and a bitter taste in Kasparov's mouth for losing this kind of game. Maybe
especially
losing is one that he was dominant. He was dominant.
He was a dominating position, and to be fair, he had let go of the game a little bit. It seemed like he had a very clear advantage at some point. He had some very real pressure, and we see the final position. To me, this is not so clear. A couple of rooks came off the board. Suddenly, pawn takes on e4 is a real issue. I don't know. This doesn't seem like it's clear at all. But 15 moves ago,
have time.
15 moves ago,
he was dominant.
He was dominant. He had time. He had everything going for him.
The doubts might start to creep in. Well, let's take a look at the current standings after that